Good evening, Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back to Hilaal Live. I'd like to thank you, the viewer, for staying with us. I'd also like to thank my colleague Luqman Shadrack for taking you through the first part of the show. Now, generally we would have two interviews on Hilaal Live, but today we've dedicated it with one. Of course, it's one of the developing stories that, of course, occurred yesterday, and that is South African lawyers who are preparing a lawsuit against the governments of the United States and the United Kingdom over alleged complicity in Israel war crimes against Palestinians in Gaza. A group of around 50 lawyers led by South African attorney Wikus Van Rensburg are working with lawyers from the US and UK to take their case to the civil courts. Joining us now via Zoom is Mr. Van Rensburg himself. Good day, Mr. Van Rensburg. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me.
No, it's an absolute pleasure.
Welcome Mr. to your viewers.
No, it's an absolute pleasure hosting you, Mr. Van Rensburg. Before we talk about this specific case, I just wanted to get your take on South Africa's presentation last week at the ICJ. It's getting a lot of applause. It's getting a lot of praise. I'm assuming you, one of them, of course, who would have praised their deliberation last week.
That is correct. I think South Africa put forward a brilliant case, very succinct, very to the point, and comparing that to the Israeli submissions made, I know I could probably get shot on what I'm going to say, but there's no comparative ability between the two sides. The South African lawyers were brilliant.
Mr. Van Rensburg, let's talk about this current case. Now, to the layman, of course, who has obviously been under the rock for quite some time, it's clear that, of course, the United States and the United Kingdom have voiced their unwavering support for Israel. Break us down this case. Break us down what are the merits with regards to that and how it's going to be achieved.
Insofar as the ICJ case or the civil case?
The civil case. Let's start, of course, with the civil case, yeah.
The civil case, we intending to institute what they call a class action. It's where you sue on behalf of a substantial group of people. And in terms of that, if you're successful, you get a judgment in your favor, and then those monies will be utilized for those people that can prove that they've had a right to part of those monies that is being claimed. Now, we will be instituting it in the two separate jurisdictions of the USA as well as the UK, in terms of which we're asking the court to grant compensation to the people who we represent, to assist them in future for what they have suffered during this whole invasion of Gaza and the I don't want to say atrocities, because there's a lot of people that don't agree with that, but that's my opinion on what has occurred in Gaza and what they have experienced. Now, there'll be medical expenses for life. There'll be emotional, psychological expenses for life for a lot of these people, as well as breadwinners that has been killed by the war, because the civilian total is just unacceptable insofar as this is concerned. The approach by the Israeli Defense Force to kill one Hamas person, they're prepared to kill 100 civilians. That is just not justified to us as legal practitioners, because they're using the excuse of self-defense. We accept self-defense as a right. However, there are limits to self-defense. If you're in a fist fight and you suddenly pull out a weapon and shoot the other person, that will be exceeding the boundaries of self-defense. And it's our legal opinion that Israel has exceeded the boundaries of self-defense.
Mr. Van Rensburg, what are the key points when, of course, you approach the court that are going to be made in order to make sure that there is a strong argument on behalf of the people of Gaza?
It will be a civil case where we will have to lead evidence, and we will be introducing witnesses that has experience, which is party of the class, party to the class action, what they have experienced. We are obtaining statements, video evidence. A lot of information is being gathered by my colleagues, which we intend putting together and utilizing at the end of the day in civil proceedings. Now, as this is a civil case, you will have to have experts to show how do you come to the calculation of the amount claimed, but that is now a speciality which falls within an actuary's field of expertise, and they will assist in calculating what is the monies lost by these individuals because of the conduct of by the Israeli Defense Force. So it will all come down to what the court is willing to grant. We will obviously ask for the maximum that we can, and that will be based on our expert evidence. The atrocities that has happened will be led by way of oral evidence, video evidence, documentary evidence, all the specific proof that you normally utilize in a civil case will be presented in the class action as would be done in any normal other court.
Mr. Van Rensburg, talk to us about the team that is being, that of course you are part of, and how many of them are going to be the legal team that represented South Africa last week at the ICJ? And of course, there are legal experts that are coming from the US and the UK. So if you could maybe break down who will be joining you and the strength and the merit of what they can bring in terms of this case.
The team that argued the ICJ last week is not part of our group. We are non-governmental aligned group that thought of what is happening there is not right, and there's got to be some accountability. Now, there's approximately 40 lawyers on the group that has been created by myself, of which about 15 to 20 are directly involved in initiating this matter against the USA and UK. It consists of legal practitioners from both the bar and sidebar, also the independent bar, senior counsel, lawyers that has got the title of senior counsel. There's normal advocates, which is classified as a junior advocate, just because they don't have the SC title. And then there is attorneys, who is normally the people doing the runaround work for advocates, but in this stage, we're working together as a team. There's no distinguishing between an advocate and an attorney, and we're all doing this because of the feeling that we've got that what is happening is not right, and looking at the law, it is not justifiable. So we've got a excess of experience and knowledge, both from a criminal side as well as a civil side. So all the aspects that can be covered will be covered by this team, and we will be subdividing the group into various categories. So each section within the group will deal with a speciality itself. And therefore, we cover a wider basis to make sure that no preliminary issues and or jurisdictional issues and or eliminating points can be raised. The American and UK law firms assisting us, we'll obviously be utilizing them in these two courts, and subject to us getting permission to write of appearance in the two courts, we will be assisting them insofar as presenting the case is concerned. I would say the case will be 80% conducted by us as South African legal practitioners. However, the other 20% will be done by the foreign firms of legal practitioners, because we will be playing in their background, and it's better to have someone who knows the court and the court system than us going into these courts not knowing their court system like we know the South African court system. So it is not only juniors, but seniors. Everyone is involved that's got the interest and thinks on the same level of the injustice that's being committed.
After the break, I continue my conversation with Wikus Van Rensburg. We're going to be breaking down in terms of what happened last week and how that can assist the legal team that he is part of in those charges that are going to be instituted against the US and the UK. Do stay tuned to Hilaal Live. Welcome back to Hilaal Live. I'm still in conversation with Wikus Van Rensburg, who is, of course, an attorney at Van Rensburg Attorneys there in the coast of Gaza. And, of course, he is leading a group of lawyers to institute complicity of war crimes against the US and the UK in the current war on Gaza. Right, Mr. Van Rensburg, I want to bring in complicity because, obviously, we don't have, and of course this is according to what we see on mainstream media, UK and US troops representing their nations that are down there in Gaza. Now, this is of course where the issue of complicity comes in. What are the evidences that are going to be presented in proving that the US and the UK have been assisting Israel in what is currently happening in Gaza and the war that is taking place against the civilian population of that area?
Well, the easiest complicity example will be the financing of the Israeli Defense Force by the USA, as well as the UK in providing access for the waterways to deliver the American arms and ammunition which is being provided. Now, I've noticed that the Houthis are actually attacking US boats that is on its way to deliver weapons and ammunition to the Israeli Defense Force. And part of their defense to the attacks within the Red Sea is we are not attacking international ships, we are only attacking those ships that supports the Israeli government by providing the necessary ammunition and war equipment which is being ordered. We know that America provides India with, I think it's $2.3 billion a year for their defense force, subject to the money being spent within the American system to buy the necessary war equipment. And you cannot fund a nation committing these, well, people will differentiate with me when I use the word crimes, but this conduct by the Israeli government in Gaza. Now, you cannot provide the resources for an institution or for a person or for a government. And those resources is being utilized to the extent that is violating the rights of other individuals or other nations, and say you are not complicit because you provide this knowing well what it will be utilized for, and therein lies the complicity.
Mr. Van Rensburg, how much of last week is going to be used as a sort of presentation in terms of genocidal intent? Now, we saw many of the legal representatives of South Africa arguing in terms of genocidal intent, and they put quite a compelling case forward in terms of providing source material, because I think that was one of the points of contention last week. So how much of that is going to be used as, you know, a proof of evidence from your part in showing that, look, there is a genocidal intent from Israel, and again, this is being backed by the US and the UK, who have completely voiced their unwavering support for Israel?
The two court cases, the one at the ICJ and the one that we will be instituting, is the ICJ was an application to interdict Israel from continuing with its bombardment of Gaza. Our case will be an action in terms of which we will lead evidence by way of witnesses, expert witnesses, documentary proof, video proof, all the necessary evidence that is required in a civil case will be presented by us whereas in the ICJ, what was submitted was purely on the papers. South Africa did a brilliant job insofar as presenting its case on the papers. However, our case will be more direct evidence insofar as what is transpiring. And that's the difference between the two court cases, one being an application, one being an action. We are currently obtaining the necessary evidence as far as we can to start building our case, whereas in the South African ICJ case, there was statements that was out in public which was utilized. However, we will be calling witnesses to come and testify, to which obviously the defendant will have a right to cross-examine and test the case that we will be presenting. Also, in a civil court, intent is not only direct intent. There's also the principle of consequence intent. The Oscar Pistorius case in South Africa is a classic example. If you shoot within or discharge a firearm through a door and someone being in on the other side, and you kill that person, that is what they call dolus eventualis. You reconcile yourself with the possibility of certain consequences when you have an action, and accordingly, there doesn't have to be direct intent. Now, America, in our contention in the civil side, has got the direct intentions because they've made it clear within the media and their policies in supporting this process and Israel. However, their conduct can be extended further. They're knowing well that their funds are being utilized and they don't care about the consequences. And this is where our case comes in. We want to have accountability for those nations and or states which supports acts of this nature where it exceeds, in our opinion, justifiability. As self-defense has got limitations, and we feel that the limitations has been exceeded and they've reached the defense of self-defense.
Mr. Van Rensburg, you mentioned, of course, witnesses that you are going to be calling, and one would say that the best witnesses to call are those from Gaza who are experiencing what is currently happening at the moment. There are difficulties for them to obviously appear at the civil courts because of, the various issues that they are going through. And it doesn't need even more explaining with regards to that. So how do you intend on getting witnesses that will make statements that really hit home hard and really give a detailed explanation as to what is happening in that part of Palestine?
Our team has already started obtaining statements from South African citizens that were in Gaza, that experienced it. Also, who's got family members within Gaza experiencing what is currently happening there. And Gaza civilians there at the moment. The big concern we have, and which has happened already, we've obtained statements from civilians within Gaza which has been killed in the interim. So we're sitting now with a statement, but however, our witness has died. Now, if Israel continues in its conduct at this present moment, by the time our case reaches the court, with all due respect, we might not have any more civilians to come and testify. And that's why where the ICJ case is so important for the conduct by Israel to be interdicted and stopped. Not that they say that Israel will comply with it. However, they will face a massive uphill if they don't adhere to the ICJ judgment, because that will have certain consequences, and hopefully enough pressure can be put on by the international community on Israel to stop this conduct. We've also been accused that this is an issue of religion, the Jewish religion versus the Muslim or Islamic religion. For us as South African lawyers, it's got nothing to do with religion. It is what is justified, what is right and wrong. What has happened and the amount of civilians that has died. And to me personally, especially the amount of children, that the parents have to write the names of their children on their arms. And the parents' names on the children's arms and having to look the next day, are you going to have an arm left? Or am I going to be alive to see and to find my children and or my parents? That is, I don't know how to describe it. It's just something that
it goes beyond words.
No person, yeah, it's shocking.
I know, it does definitely go beyond words. Mr. Van Rensburg, one final question. What next? Of course, it is the civil case, and I'd like to think that what is happening at the ICJ and the case that you are bringing along with the team that you are part of is intertwined. So what next? Does this go to another international court of justice, like the International Criminal Court? What now happens? Because this has to take a higher level. So maybe if you can just explain that to us, what is the next level after, of course, this civil court case that you are bringing forward?
The ICC will be the criminal prosecution leg or arm of the International Court. They will go after, or they will investigate what war crimes has been committed, what breaches of international law, as well as if there's any genocidal conduct, depending on the ICJ judgment. They will prosecute that like normal criminal prosecution. Example, in South Africa, you have someone who breaks into your house, it gets caught, that gets criminally prosecuted. There's a complainant. In this instance, South Africa has been a complainant at the ICC, lodging a complaint against Israel, which is subject to investigation and further conducting of the matter to determine are there criminally liability insofar as the conduct is concerned, and that will be criminally prosecuted. On our side is of a civil nature that is totally separate. The onus insofar as proving whether there is liability, it's much less than in your criminal system. And we will be feeding from the ICC information and utilizing it to favor and or promote our case, because ultimately all the facts are interlinked. If we can provide any information to the ICC on what we've obtained, we will be providing to them to assist them in prosecuting this matter. But ultimately, depending on the decision by the ICJ, will depend on what happens at the ICC. It won't stop the ICC and criminal investigation. As you know, there's already an investigation being conducted by the ICC. But the general feeling I've observed is that it's going very slow and it's to some extent one-sided, as the prosecutor has not been in Gaza to go and investigate and speak to witnesses. It is understandable that he might not want to go into Gaza at the moment because of the continuous conflict that's there. However, at some point in time, he's got to complete his investigation, make his submissions, and then the court will decide whether they will prosecute it or not. Our civil case will carry on as a normal civil case. It can be hampered by time, but we have time to prosecute this matter. Yes, hopefully the Palestinians can survive this period and don't get all killed as so-called collateral damage. But the international community will probably also provide some assistance in the pressure they put on Israel after the ICJ judgment. If it's in South Africa's favor, it will give a clear indication and send a signal. Then it goes obviously to the UN, and the UN will determine how to process or proceed further. That doesn't require us to be involved in any way or form. We will just carry on a civil side, as we are not bound by the UN.
Mr. Van Rensburg, thank you so much for joining us here on Hilaal TV, and all the best ahead of your case.
Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure there. It's Wikus Van Rensburg from Van Rensburg Attorneys down in Gqeberha, because we will be keeping an eye on those proceedings here at Hilaal TV. After the break, I'll have your latest in news, finance and sports. Do stay tuned.